Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today I want to present to you my take on Cast on Death Discharge with, I think I have like around about 20 billion damage average hit. And this build is not getting calculated in DPS, what normally builds are. This is more a DPP build, so damage per portal roundabout, just because we are using Cast on Death with Discharge. This is over here. And we are just here to blow up bosses. I'm currently farming 1000 Uber bosses, with that being 500 Uber Exiles, Exarch, and 500 Eater of Worlds with Hate of Hubris, so all the invitations are doubled. I think like every invitation has an average of like 150 quantity, and having the Insatiable Appetite as well as Thirst of Knowledge, and we just go in, we one-shot the boss, go out, and just, you know, make like a science project, what they drop on killing both of the bosses 500 times each, so 1000 Uber bosses, and what did we get. But more of that in the upcoming next video. Today I want to present to you my take on the Cast on Death Discharge build, and the problem is there is a lot of misconceptions on this build, as well as like what does work, what does not work, what is a fake PUB, what is a real PUB. I don't even know if everything that I do works the way that it should be. I did test quite a shit ton, and I think I spent round about 4 mirrors into my build. 2 of them are my mirror drinks with a double power charge, and then 2 mirrors on the rest of the entire gear, running like Awakened Enhance, Awakened Empower, just like my take on like overkilling everything, okay? And I want to go like over a couple of points before I go into like the gearing and how to do a build like that, because there are like a shit ton of builds out there that currently do that, just to kill off the Uber Exarch and the Eater of Worlds, right? And I'm just gonna answer the most common questions, and then we're gonna go into a little bit more detail on how I build it, because I have 20 billion damage. How much do you actually need to one-shot a boss? Probably a billion or something, and this is super easy achievable with like 20x or something. And there are a lot of content creators that show you how to make a cheap Cast on Death character. I just said I want to do the extreme version, you know, MB Extreme, and I want to see how much I go. I made a voting for a build, and the people voted for the 10 billion plus. And the goal was to reach 10 billion, and I reached 20 billion. So, and this is the first thing that I want to talk about. What is your actual DPS? So with my current version of the build, which is this one, the PUB is in the description below, I would have 20 billion damage with average hit. Is this true? No, actually it's not. It's what PUB tells me, okay? So what can we apply to that and what not? First of all, I can say safely, I have 1 minimum power and 1 minimum frenzy. That means if I remove my Cast on Death, I cannot use Discharge because it needs to consume charges, and a minimum charge cannot be consumed. So if I press all my flasks, I do have 13, 13, and 5, and that translates to 12, 12, and 5, you know? And so the first thing that we have to do is actually set here 12, because it calculates with 13, 12, 12, and 5, so I'm actually currently on 17 billion, but I'm not really mad about it, just because I said I want to reach 10 billion, and even with a complete non-bullshit PUB, I'm still way above that, right? The second step is, this is a Blood Aqueduct setup, okay? That means we need to calculate Shaper DPS. Shaper DPS, I'm currently on 9.6 billion. And the next thing is, if you run an Uber boss that we can do, we're going to showcase a couple of bosses so you guys see how I did this boss. Every Uber boss has 70% less damage taken. So to do this properly, we have 70% less damage into my custom config, and now I'm on 2.8 or 2.9 billion. I'm not sure entirely. I think an Uber boss has around about 40 million life, so we are overkilling that by a fuck ton, you know? And the next thing that I want to talk about is obviously the modifiers. So this build is specifically designed to do 2 things. Killing Exarch in a one-shot, killing the Eater of Worlds in a one-shot. It cannot do anything else. And this is the next thing that I want to talk about is, yo, this build will get nerfed 100% because, you know, this is just busted and broken and whatnot. No, I don't think so, because I even found videos from back in 2014. This is a video that is like 7 or 8 years old, and people were using Cast on Death or discharge build with the same setup as we use it now many years later to farm Dominos back in the days, okay? So for those people that say like, yo, you stole this build from this person, that person, this person, or the other person, this build is like one of the oldest builds that is in the game, and that's also the reason why I don't think that this will get nerfed next league, because in the end of the day, it's a pure softcore build that exists since many years, and it can only do 2 bosses. I cannot even run a simple map with this build because I don't have resistance, I don't have defenses, and I only have 6 portal to complete the map, and I will die to the way to the boss, okay? The next thing that a lot of people ask me, how many deaths do you have? I'm currently sitting on 2,176 deaths, which is not really accurate for like exploding, just because this is still my league starter. So if I do a slash plate, I'm having like over 10 days pure playtime on this character. This was the SS Drain character, this was my league starter, my Delver, like this build, or at least this character, exists since a long time. So what other questions did I get very often? How does this work with the flasks? This is like something that I actually wanted to go over with explaining how this build works. But the way I do this, I just have, I lay a Stonebrand so I can trigger my Heart of Destruction, the 30% more damage, the Convergence or whatever it's called. And then in this window, at least after I proc that, I get my Bottled Faith, and then I have like a window of like 4 seconds to one-shot the boss. And every flask here gives me like 3 charges, but every time we get damage. So we want to make sure that we die on the 4th flask and not before, but a little bit later on the specific thing here. But the way I do this, I'm not using a macro or anything. I just have like all my 4 fingers here on 1, 2, 3, 4, and I just press them instantly at the same time, which means I instantly get my charges. I have my Righteous Fire. If you go like later on in a showcase and we go frame by frame, you're gonna see that I will actually have my charges. I will have all the things up, and it's snapshots as well as my curses. Good. I would say let's blow up like one of each bosses. The way I actually run these bosses, this is the difference of an expensive death build and a cheap death build, and this is the way what mods you can run. And we can go over a couple of mods. Let's do one away so I can like chaos spam and show you a couple of mods that are terrible. The way I do it, I throw an Alk on it, I throw a Val on it, and whatever mod I get is the mod that I get. There are modifiers that are annoying, and some of them I don't mind anymore, right? Because I have so much damage. So let's do the first one. And one thing I want to say as well with like, do I just go in and do have a 2.9 billion damage? Because as you see here on the, since I have also Hate of Hubris, all my invitation modifiers are doubled. But this like 70%, monsters take 70% less damage. This is an uber modifier, okay? This will always be there. So I cannot calculate a real DPS without this line over here. It's just like faking DPS. I want to be realistic here, right? Good. Okay, one thing that I want to make sure here, why can I not just go in and one-shot the boss and go out? Because GGG implemented a degenning invisible shield, more or less. I'm not 100% sure what is the exact number, but let's assume it's 100% less damage in the start on like the first frame. And over 8 seconds, this will deplete to 0. That means if I wait for 1 second, the boss still has 90% less damage taken plus the 70 over here. So this this is GGG's way to prevent us from one-shotting the boss. So when will I actually have 2.9 billion damage? It is if I trigger the boss and I run in a circle for 8 seconds and then blow him up. This is when I get the real damage. But the more damage you have, the less you can like think about that. So what I'm gonna do over here, since I see there is just 80% more monster life, which is a lot, right? But there is other modifiers that are worse. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay down my Stonebrand. I'm gonna wait until I see the Bottled Faith ground, and then I'm gonna press all my 4 flasks. And this will probably is like 1 second or something, so it will still have a lot less damage taken. And I hope that I'm not gonna one-shot it. So I'm using this. I'm activating my auras and just see, boom. So as you see, I only did like 50% of his life. And this is, and now you say like, yo, this is never 2.9 billion. What are you talking? But it is because of this, okay? He had just such a ridiculous amount. So now the 8 seconds are over, basically. So I don't need convergence, I don't need anything. I mean, this is a little bit shitty here, because I cannot... Let me try. I'm gonna try to dash to this point here. Okay. I need to dash over because I don't have resistance and try to AoE nuke him. Okay, so I flame dashed and instantly pressed my buttons, and since I'm a cultist, I have so much AoE that I can just one-shot him from range, basically. I think my discharge is bigger than an actual, than I actually showed over here, right? But as you see, even though I did not have my Stonebrand, I did not have Convergence, I did not have my Cemetery, I had a lot less things, and I still did more than I did before with everything up, which also shows you on how this is working. We're gonna do another try here. So this one was 80% more life, okay? So I would say we're gonna take another one that has more life as well. So this one. Since I'm playing with Hate of Hubris, I mean, Steel Charges, that could not work, because this is one of the modifiers that are a little bit stupid. But we just had an 80% more monster life, now we have like a 70% more monster life. So it's pretty much the same. So we're gonna do the same. But this time, I'm gonna lay down my brands over here. I'll let him walk over to me. And when he gets into range, I'm waiting for his auto attack and then blow him up. So even though this was like the same amount of life that the boss had, on the second try, I was able to one-shot him, and on the first try, it was not. And why is that? Because there were like 3 or 4 seconds that were depleted. So the invisible buff was on like 60%, you know? And that's why I say the less damage you have, the longer you have to wait to have this potential one-shot. So, and this is like a thing that a lot of people do not know. I do play pretty much the same. I don't know which modifiers these are. They're just like invisible here. Do we have like a super big one? Yeah, he has 110. We're gonna do this next. Maybe we get a good thing. Here I do the same. There is 2 ways to do this. Either, like when he is turbo, then it's hard. But usually, you just lay down your brand, activate auras, I wait for 3 slaps, and then blow him up. So there is like 3-4 seconds going, and then I just blow him up, whatever mods there are, because I cannot really see it, since it was a wild one. Or another trick on how to do this boss successfully, let's open another one here, is to just stay range, okay? So I move here, I trigger him, but I move away from him. So I will just put down my thing over here, I dash away, and then dash in his face. The dash didn't even went off, but doesn't matter. But this is another way. You trigger him and then run away, so he has to run to you to actually benefit from this like depleting shield. And now we're gonna do this like 100, 220 actually. Because thanks to Hate of Hubris, this one is doubled, right? So this one has Patch of Desecrated Ground, more monster damage, Reflect, Fizz, extra, and no, actually this is an easy boss, because he has a lot of damaging abilities, but since we're gonna one-shot him, most likely, we don't care about all these like damage things. I cannot stand on Consecrated Ground, so I just do it the same way. I wait until he tries to auto-attack me and then blow him up. And this was, by the way, at 220% quantity map. So you can just like, the better your build is, then you can just like out can go. And I want to talk about the mods that are shit for this build and how do they actually work in the way that I did it. So for example, if we're just gonna alk this one and check the mods here. I'm not saying about something about like more monster life. Of course it sucks a little bit, but if he has more life and if I have enough damage, I'm still gonna one-shot it. But there is other modifiers that ruin your damage. Okay, let's see. More monster life, whatever. Next one. Unique, more monster life, enfeeble, cannot curse anything. Okay, here we have 2 mods that are actually hard. As I say again, with Hate of Hubris, to get the most quantity rarity out of it, this one gets doubled. So the boss will have 80% elemental resistance. So this basically means that I only will do 20% of my damage. On top of that, it has 60% chance to spell suppression, which means with the Hate of Hubris, it's doubled. So it's 120%. Over 100% doesn't matter, but 100% spell suppression means that the elemental damage or spell damage that I do is only dealing 50% of the damage. So in one hand, let's see what happens with modifiers like that to my damage. As I said, we open POB, we do 70% less damage, I'm down to 2.8. From the beginning, like 9 point something or even 20, whatever. So we go to Cyrus, This is the Uber boss modifier, so I'm down to 2.9 billion. So then we say the boss has 80% ally resistance, so we could technically say, I'm not entirely sure how to calculate this properly, but we need to do another line with 80% less damage. I cannot just say this is 150 because then I would literally heal the boss, right? As I say again, this is not the accurate calculation, but it's just a showcase on what modifiers actually do. So we have, let's say we have 80% less damage again because the monster has 80% extra resistance, right? And now I only have like 570 mil. And if the monster has 100% spell suppression, means he only gets 50% of the spell damage, we can add another percent and 50% less damage. And now I only have 290 mil. So that basically means that just because of these two modifiers, my damage is like only a 5% or 10% of my actual damage, right? I'm actually interested if I can still one-shot this boss because my damage is kind of ridiculous. So, there are other modifiers. I think I'm not going to go for everything. I want to mention two more, which is monsters deal power for its endurance charge. If I have all my charges up, he hits me with anything and all my charges are gone. And the discharge without charges is 0 damage. So this basically ruins all your damage at once if he hits you. But I want to mention like one extra mod if I hit it, and this is the reduced damage of critical strikes. If we're gonna get this, like the monster maximum life as extra ES is also quite ridiculous because in the Hate of Hubris version it goes up to like 100% maximum life as extra ES, which basically doubles his life as well. But I'm actually looking for this one specific one. I hope that I can find it in the next couple of chaos. Okay, here we are. Monsters take 37% reduced extra damage from critical strikes, and since we use the anomalous cast on death, and that means we're gonna guarantee crit the boss, right? But if it's 37% reduced extra damage, which turns into 74%, means we're only gonna deal 26% of our actual damage. So there are some invitations that make the build very, very reliable on how much damage do you do. One-shotting a boss with a naked invitation, you know, everybody can do this. Like this one, boss has like 40 mil life and whatever, you know. But then if you have like, if you start volleying your maps and you have like pretty ridiculous ones, and sometimes it just has extra life, it has extra life as ES, it has spell suppression capped, it is like reduced extra damage from critical strikes, then you end up, instead of like your 3 billion damage, you end up having 50 million damage. So if you wonder like, why can I not one-shot the boss, either it has some ridiculous modifiers or you're not waiting long enough and it just has like even more less damage taken. But I would say this is like a good explanation on if you want to play a build like that, on what you have to look out for. So the next thing that I want to talk about is, I mean, the things is like, this is a little bit more complex. If you want to do a budget build of this, as I say again, check out other content creators. I just want to showcase my version and why my version has so much damage. And I think this comes from the immense amount of power charge stacking. I have 2 power charges on my helmet. I have 2 power charges on each of the rings. So this is like 6 extra power charges, and on the other stuff. And then the rest is like pretty generic. The Annihilating Light with like the triple damage with elemental skills. So this is just insane damage. One thing I want to mention here with the curse setup. So as far as I know, if you would have a cast on death setup on every single spot that you have over here, it would go from weapon, first cast on death trigger, then helmet, then chest, then gloves, and then boots. So if I would have my discharge into my weapon and my curses in the chest, then the discharge would go off before cursing the enemy, something like that. I just want to replicate what I learned over the days of playing this build, what I learned from the Twitch chat and doing research. If this is 100% guaranteed, I'm not so sure, but this is the way I learned it. And other people told me as well, it depends on the way you have your gear socketed. That means if my cast on death is over here, and then it's ally weakness, and then it's withering step, and then let's say it's cast on death discharge. Somebody told me that it takes the first gem of each. That means the first one would be now ally weakness, then it would follow up with discharge, then it would follow up with withering step, then with frostbite and assassin's mark. I do not know because I'm one-shotting the bosses all the time. I don't know if my assassin's mark did count or did not count. But to make it easy, I just put my cast on like all my support gems in the first place and put my discharge in the last spot. So this way I would pretty much guarantee, and then I just put like support gems and hands on the last spot. So either if it works or not, in this way I would be safe to do it. Good. How this build works is pretty much easy explained. You have those flasks, and every time you use the flask, you're getting damage as chaos damage. So press one flask and you see I just lost a bunch of life. I press a second flask, I lose life again. And you want to manage to just kill yourself on the fourth flask. And you also want to make sure, since we have a cast when damage taken Righteous Fire, means that you don't want to have your Righteous Fire pop on your first flask. You want to have it on your third flask before you pop, okay? And the way to manage that is with, like, every build works a little bit different, you know. Mine has like 1600 life, yours has maybe 2000 life, but you control this with chaos resistance. For example, if I would just respec a couple of points, we're gonna do this right here. Let me just respec, for example, low life over here, and I take more chaos res. So at the moment I'm running on 41. This is the one that works out for me. Now I'm having 64. That means that I'm most likely not gonna die on my last flask, and I'm gonna just quickly put away Righteous Fire so we don't screw this one up. So I'm full life. I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, and you see I still have 20% life. I will not kill myself because I have too much chaos res. If I have too low chaos res, then I will most likely die on my third flask, and that means I miss out on power, frenzy, and endurance charges. Let's try this again. We're gonna go full up. 1, 2, 3. I press 3 flasks here and I'm dead. So the fourth flask that will give me another charges will not. I will never use this flask. And the best way to find out, since this character will get like a bunch of death, you can just go to Blood Aqueducts and just nuke yourself over and over again and see how many stuff that you use. As I said, I'm pressing all 4 buttons at the same time. Boom. I exploded and I see all my flasks are getting used. If I would have, as I said, too much or too low chaos resistance, and I will do the same, then boom, as you see, my flask number 2 is still full. This did not work. This is like an easy way to test in Blood Aqueducts, do you have enough chaos res or not? And I think the sweet spot is somewhere around 40 to 45, and I have a jewel here with like chaos resistance, so if I have too much or too low, then I still have like 7 to 13, and I'm playing around with that. Another thing that I want to mention is the upgrade path, since my build is still not done. Believe it or not, I made POBs with over 35 billion, but this is like unrealistic. This would be with Hydrosphere, with extra exposures and things like that. And I wanted to have a good solid build that just one-shots bosses, even though there are the worst modifiers, and sometimes I was not even able to. But that doesn't matter, because even if I had 10 billion more damage, I would still not one-shot the boss based on the defense modifiers, right? And I gotta say, I tested out a bunch of things. Here is, I tested like 4 times corrosive elements to apply all times of cold, like cold, lightning, fire exposure with my skills. I found out that Discharge will not apply exposures because, I don't know why, but it just doesn't work, you know. We tested this, I one-shotted him, there was just no exposure, because you see that if the enemy is vulnerable to things. So as I said, I put like 10 hours just for testing things in Blood Aqueducts with a friend, trying to not one-shot the boss. What does work? Does my Discharge apply a shock effect? And so like a lot of things that I tested. But the corrosive elements and other things like 4 times Sadist, you know, I'm not chilling, shocking, igniting the enemy, and even with skitter bots, it does not count for me. So the best way that I found out was Prismatic Heart with Snowstorm, and you might wonder, wouldn't the best way would be a one-voice passives with Quadra, the Quadra multiplier jewels? And no, it's not. I tested this version deals more damage, and I even made a POB that I will also link, which is my Theory Craft, with 22 billion damage. And the difference between this one and the one that I currently have in-game is just a chest, because I'm wearing a +4 chest over here, and I do not have a +4, I have only a +2, because I have those on Live Search since I started this entire build. One would be let's check offline, the Skin of the Loyal, but it needs to have 1 socketed gems and +2 AoE. Not a single one appeared on the market, but there is a second one that you could use, which is Dahlia's Malefiction, which is pretty much the same. If it has all red sockets and it ignores the socket colors, you still have a +4. There was one online for 200 exalts, I think, but I said, like, I wanted to have 10 billion, I made 20 billion, so do I want to spend half a mirror for an extra 3 billion damage? No, I did not want to do that, but this is something you can do to even improve the build even further. Other than that, yeah, I don't know what to explain more about that. If you're wondering, why do I have Withering Stab? It's when my Cast on Death goes off, I see those eyes popping up, so I know the enemy is withered. Why do I need a withered enemy? Because I have the belt enchant. For enemies withered take another -6 L res, which means I actually deal even more damage, right? So I tweaked this build quite a bit, I would say. Even with like Badge of the Brotherhood here with Discipline of the Slaughter, since we have so many frenzy charges, we get all the extra damage. And yeah, I think it was a very, very fun experiment. Feel free to copy this one. Feel free to just not spend so much currency on a build like that. Because if you one-shot the boss with like 10 billion overkill or 10 million overkill, it doesn't matter. A one-shot is a one-shot, and I just tried to make my personal best version out of it. And don't get tricked on yourself. I think 20x, you should be able to make a reliable killer if you take care of what I teach you on how to approach the bosses, on how to roll your maps and stuff like that. And obviously, the more you spend on your character, the less you have to take care of that. Because in my version, I can even run all of the modifiers. I even had like 230 quantity with like 3 defensive modifiers. And I was still able to two-shot him, right? And most builds would just suffer quite heavily because they will not have the damage output. But on how this entire thing works, why do we use search binders, I think you can take this information out of other people's guides or content creators that have like a better knowledge than I do on this build. All right, I'm going to continue now farming my way up to kill 1,000 Uber bosses. And I'm going to keep you guys updated on how the journey went, what did drop, and maybe have an idea if you want to farm those bosses in the next league yourself. I'm going to give you guys my POB that I have in-game and the one that I plan to use to see if you want to replicate it or just to see how I did it, basically. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.